this in corporate plays. We'll groove through it all in funky ways. So join us now, let's find our way. Listen to bits and pivots every single day. Ooh, get money, get paid.
Hey, so I wanted to talk to this woman, Emily Johnson. She is a burnout coach, specifically for women. So if you've followed me for a minute and you've listened to the podcast, you know my story about burnout. I just got super burned out on sales and I just had to quit. I couldn't take it anymore. And if you've been through something like that, where you end up making really irrational decisions like that. I'm not the type of person that would tell anyone to just fucking wake up one morning and quit their job on a whim without any kind of backup plan. That's crazy. But there's really something going on with when you're going through serious foundational burnout like that, where it's you just, I don't know, it removes the ability to think clearly. So Emily Johnson, she's a burnout coach. She's been doing it, for a long time, 5-6 years, something like that. And so I just wanted to figure out what is it exactly, and what's going on with you physically and psychologically when you're going through that stuff. Because one, I think it's important to talk about on this podcast, because I think sales is a high burnout profession. It's, as salespeople, we go through a lot more bullshit than any other profession. People in accounting, they don't have quotas and shit like that hanging over them, where it's you have to do this or you might lose your job, So the environment kind of lends itself to people getting fucking burnt and just being fuck it, I'm out of here. So just wanted to get a better understanding of it. And also obviously learn from her, how to prevent these things, how to recover from burnout. So I found it valuable. I hope you found it. You find it valuable. This is episode 1 of 2. So it's our conversation is basically cut in half. So listen to part 1 this week and tune in next week for part 2 with Emily Johnson, burnout coach. Connect with her on LinkedIn too, Emily Johnson on LinkedIn, and just look for the Emily Johnson that looks like the person I'm interviewing to find her. Oh, and her website is Align with Emily. I should probably know that. Hang on, let me look it up. Let me look it up. Oh. Align with, let's see if I remembered it right. Emily.com. No. All right, hang on. I should have done this before I fucking started recording. Where is she? All right. Emily Johnson. She's a burnout coach. She's the host of the Breaking Burnout podcast. She's in Vancouver, British Columbia. And she works primarily with women. But I think if you're a guy, contact her and maybe she can refer you to someone or something. Her website is alignwithemilyj.com. I'm going to have the link to it down in the show notes too. So just look for it there. So here you go. Part 1 of 2 with Emily Johnson. Enjoy. Again, thanks for the time. You're a burnout coach. So the first thing I wanted to learn is how'd you get into this? Because it looks like you come from a marketing background. So kind of interested how you found your way into this.
Such a good question. And I think it's important to share the journey of how I got here. It's very relevant to what I do now. I actually started my career in corporate marketing and sales for big brands of alcohol. So Pt.1, Don Julio, Captain Morgan, Crown Royal. I was marketing and selling those in a very competitive market in San Francisco. And It was a great, cushy corporate job. I really enjoyed it. But the demands of the industry, of the alcohol industry, and of the actual role itself, it was, after a few years, I started to really burn out of the social demands. There was a lot of lack of boundaries in personal, professional life. And, frankly, I was drinking a lot. I was taking shots at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday after closing a deal of tequila. And while that was fun at 26, I knew that this wasn't my path long term. So I listened to that inner knowing and I took a plunge to find a different career path. And I actually went back to school to be a holistic nutritionist. And
Nice.
that experience was a huge internal transformational journey that I didn't even know I needed. And that led me to starting my business. And then I actually pivoted from nutrition to burnout because I had experienced burnout. That was like my third or fourth time experiencing burnout, the first time in corporate, second time transitioning from that corporate job to being a full-time student again, moving to a new
Mm,
country. I was in San Francisco at the time. I moved to Canada, which is where I am now, to do my degree in nutrition. And that whole transition burnt me out. And then I burnt out building a business, being an entrepreneur. And so you can say that, or you can tell that I was in a cycle of burnout over and over and over again. And usually
yeah.
that's what happens, is that we have these tendencies to, it's like we have this like dormant energy within our bodies that we are, unless we're careful, burnout can happen over and over and over again. And that's what was happening to me. So now I coach
Yes.
women to prevent or recover from burnout.
Wow. I mean, just you like giving the play by play on that. It was like kind of like a whirlwind. Like it was getting me a little bit anxious, so I could see how it would give you burnout. And like I knew one other guy that was in alcohol sales. He was in wine sales,
Yeah.
and like I just from like being around him and observing, I got the impression that like, oh, this is all alcoholics in this vertical. Like he would just, I mean, he would visit people, he would drop off wine, but then he had like all these like sample bottles from vendors, and so he was just like drinking wine as a part of his job, like, oh, I have to sample the product. And so like he was just a mess. And yeah, I can imagine it was probably the same thing, like a lot of dinners, a lot of schmoozing, a lot of going
Mm-hmm.
around to bars, and then like you said, taking shots at 2 p.m. to celebrate a win.
Exactly. It was, again, like in your 20s, fun, corporate credit card, I was making pretty good money, but I didn't see myself sitting on a bar stool in my 30s and 40s. I
Yeah.
didn't want to continue down that path. And while I think it's, can be a great industry to be in, knew it wasn't for me. And I'm grateful that I listened to that inner knowing and took a huge leap of faith.
Yeah. So if we could like pull back a little bit, but how would you define burnout? Because I think it gets thrown around a lot, and like I think it's going to be different for other people. I would like to hear just kind of like the clinical, like professional elevator pitch on burnout.
For sure. I think burnout right now is heavily tied to like corporate and career, but you really can burn out anytime that you're in a chronic state of stress. And you can be in
Mm,
that chronic state of stress from a life transition. You can be in a chronic state of stress from being a new mother. You can be in that chronic state of stress from, yes, of course, like starting a new role or being in a toxic workplace or moving. There's a lot of things that can feed into your stress. And so that's what I want people to recognize, is that it's not just the career that can burn you out. It's so many lifestyle changes.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was talking like before we first started recording, and I was saying like I burned out really hard twice, and they were about 10 years apart. And each time I ended up totally pivoting careers because I just got to a point in my work where I was like, I can't do this at all anymore, ever again. And but when I look back, like I've just been super curious about it. Like, what is this? Why has it happened more than once? How can I prevent it from happening a third time? And just like looking back, and hindsight's 2020. So when I think about it, like I really think like it wasn't just work. Like there was also stuff in my personal life that was going on too. So it's kind of like we have our personal relationships, we have our finances, we have our health, we have our professional life, we have our spiritual life, we have all these different things. And it's like if all five of them are going great, that's awesome. And it's really odd, and it doesn't happen often. But if you usually have like two of them that are kind of lagging, but if you have like four out of the five that really suck for like an extended amount of time, like I think that's what really does it. So it's like if you're in a job that already sucks, and then you have like maybe like health problems and like relationship problems and money problems on top of that, like I think it's just like throwing gasoline on it. So it sounds like that's kind of like where you're at with it too.
Absolutely. I think, when I do address burnout, addressing the whole person, the whole body, what their everyday looks like from a mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional standpoint looks like. It's not just, setting boundaries. It's not just making sure that you're meditating or incorporating mindfulness. There's so
Yeah.
many things that go into burnout, and I'm sure we'll get into that in this episode.
So like when I'm like going through burnout like that, it's my anxiety gets really triggered, and my anxiety surfaces as like agitation, and I'm just kind of like, "Ugh," like really like kind of a short fuse, kind of get like really just really annoyed really easily. But so I kind of know like on the surface from kind of a mental state and like an emotional standpoint what's going on, but like physically what's going on beneath that, because I know like this last time when I came out of like after I quit my job, and then I could kind of feel myself like unraveling and like getting more relaxed, I guess, like pretty quickly. Like I was wearing a like a Whoop strap, like a fitness strap,
Yep.
and it was like my recovery was always horrible. It was like single digits. And
This is Noah. Noah sells software. He's not LinkedIn famous or anything, but he's a solid sales rep. And like a lot of us, he's faced some serious bad luck over the past few years. First, there was a layoff due to COVID, then came a rift due to economic headwinds. And just when he thought he'd found the right fit, the company he was at got acquired and he was let go shortly thereafter. Noah's resume looks bad, like really, really bad, and he worries that his luck is never going to change. He fears this pattern of bad luck is going to continue, and he's going to be constantly looking for the right job. His confidence is at an all-time low. In his weakest moments, he wonders if maybe sales just isn't for him. It's not just about finding the next role, it's about finding stability and overcoming the perception that he's a job hopper and unreliable. Noah discovers a course called Elevate Your Sales Career, designing a 5-year plan for success. It promises to arm him with insights, knowledge, and frameworks to determine exactly what he needs to do to change his luck and turn his career around. After taking the course, Noah steps back into the job market with confidence and a reliable plan for a stable, successful future in sales.
red. And then the day after I quit my job, and then for like 2 weeks after, it just shot up into green, like all of a sudden. And so it was like, oh man, there's like it's not just like it's not all in my head. Like I'm having like some physical ramifications, and I'm wondering, like, am I making that up, or is that like a legitimate thing?
Oh, it's totally legitimate. How our stress response from work or whatever is causing the stress is a body experience. It's a physical reaction. I don't know if you're familiar with the polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges, but yeah. So I would imagine that the situation that you were in, you were very much on that dorsal energy side of things, and that is impacting your inner world, and that's impacting your physiological world as well when you are in that free state. That is what burnout is when we're in that free state of the polyvagal theory at the very end, the left hand side, you could say. So
Okay.
you're not making that up at all. It's very connected to our physical self, the stress response. And so it makes so much sense why you'd be waking up in the red. I also had a Whoop, so I totally know what you're talking about.
Oh, it's
And so
crazy.
yeah, makes so much sense.
So like when you're like just chronically dysregulated like that, I would imagine your body has to like work overtime to kind of compensate, I would guess. So I would guess like that's part of it as well.
Yeah. So what happens is when we are in that chronic state of stress, our other organs and processes in our body can't actually function in the way that it's meant to, because we're
Huh.
working overtime to manage the stress. Like we're feeling like we're being chased by a tiger when we're in that chronic
Yeah.
state of stress. And so everything else shuts down. And so we're not able to rest properly. We're not able to regenerate properly. And so managing your stress is just a part of finding balance within your body and making sure that the stress isn't just so like we can react better, but it's also so our body can fight disease and
Yeah.
fight any infection or anything that might be going on.
It's so crazy. There was like this meme or I posted a meme actually on Twitter, and it was like a like they it was inside a skeleton. They stripped out someone's central nervous system, so you had like the brain and like all the nerves trailing off of it. And I wrote something like, it's crazy how this thing thinks it's being chased by baboons whenever I have to do public speaking, you know. And then like all these other people like got into it. So it's just funny to hear you say that, like, you know, we're going through this burnout and our body thinks like, oh, I gotta, you know, we're getting into fight mode. You're getting all stressed out, you know, and like, you know, blood's going to different parts of your body that it shouldn't be going to. It's crazy.
Yeah. And on that note, I think it's important to talk about the fact that physiologically, our bodies or in our stress response is always going to choose safety. So that looks like it's not safe to do certain things. Like logically, we might feel it's safe to, let's say, starting a business. Logically, we might feel like, yeah, I want to start a business. I'm a business owner. I want to be an entrepreneur. But deep down, we don't feel like it's a safe thing to do. And so we're unconsciously blocking ourselves from doing these things that we logically want and desire. Kind of a random tangent, but what you just said, but just on the topic of physiologically, like our number one priority is to be safe. And so whatever that looks like we have to do, we do it, even if it's hindering us from making moves in our life.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, that just as you were saying that, like my hand went to my stomach and it was like, you know, whenever I get stressed, like I can feel it there in my gut and kind of the middle thing. So I guess the lesson from that is to kind of like listen to your, like be mindful of your body and be really curious about what's going on in your body and these things. And like, there's this big push, I guess, to like, oh, get outside of your comfort zone and really stretch yourself and do all this. And you have to like constantly go for more and all this stuff. But I think, you know, sometimes it's like, maybe chill with that a little bit, like maybe in moderation, maybe like if you're constantly in this state of like dysregulation or what on the polyvagal, whatever on the left side you said, or I forget what you said, but if you're on the wrong end of your polyvagal thing going on there, like, you know, slow it down and, you know, make sure that you're not biting off more you can chew and kind of, you know, heading for disaster.
Yeah, it's true. It's actually a really good point. And I'm actually studying right now a lot of nervous system regulation techniques. And my mentor says what I learned, which is so fascinating, is that when we are, let's say we're chronically stressed, we're in that free state, in that dorsal energy, we actually can't, our bodies don't feel safe enough doing certain things. Like we can meditate, we can have the green smoothie, we can work out, but if our bodies aren't in this like safety mode, then we're actually not going to see or feel the results of what we're striving for. And so what you just said about, you know, getting outside our comfort zone, like, of course, like we want to do that, but we also have to first make sure that we're feeling safe in our bodies before we push ourselves. But everybody is different. You know, some people might not have those safety blocks around certain things. Everybody has blocks, but it's up to you to really tune into that body awareness and understand what feels safe for me, what doesn't feel safe for me. And, you know, if you have to do some inner work there, that's a great starting point.
So like that kind of curtails nicely into my next question, which is like, if you're someone who like has a history of going through like really foundational burnout, like how can you just be like, how can you prevent it? How can you be cognizant of like, this is something that happens for me? Like, you know, how can I kind of put some safeguards in place so I'm really like not getting myself into danger?
Great question.
What's up? Hope you enjoyed part 1 of 2 with Emily Johnson. Again, she is Emily Johnson on LinkedIn. Just look for the Emily Johnson with blonde hair in Vancouver. That's her. Super common name. It kind of makes me thankful for once for having a name like Chris Dankowski, where it's like there is one other Chris Dankowski. And oddly enough, like years ago, I had some guy, he was drunk late at night, and he called me, and he's like, hey, I'm sitting here with my son, and we were just wondering, you know, if there's any other Dankowskis, and we found you on the internet. We saw you lived in Oceanside. We used to live in Encinitas, and like, it was like, cool, we have the same last name. But yeah, so Emily Johnson, she doesn't have that phenomenon going on. So Emily Johnson on LinkedIn. Her website is alignwithemilyj.com. Go there, see how you can work with her. She has a podcast. She has support groups. She does one-on-one coaching. And next week is going to be the second part of my interview with Emily Johnson. And as a reminder, please, support the podcast if you like it. If you don't, just, fuck off. You have bad taste. But, if you do, like, subscribe, share it with friends, tell people about it. Go to my website, subscribe to the newsletter, all the things. I have free resources on the website too. So that's in the show notes. So, you can't beat free. I'm just giving it away. So go ahead and take it. I do appreciate you listening. And I was just joking. If you didn't like it, don't fuck you. It's just, you're entitled to have your opinions. It's perfectly fine. We could still be friends. Love you. Bye.